Fixtures, positional changes, predicted prices, potentially a new part of the FPL game, and of course new managers come into the league. There is loads to get through and we're going to do it in one video, under 20 minutes. This is your pre-season, pre-launch FPL preview. Welcome to my new YouTube channel. Guys, thank you so much for joining me. I hope you're enjoying the summer. But look, the fixtures have been announced. The game is just around the corner in terms of its launch date. So let's get into it. So the fixtures, who has hot streaks? And of course in FPL, the things we always look at, form and fixture. We're not going to know form come game week 1. We might know a little bit. Pre-season friendlies, we can take a little bit of info from those pre-season friendlies. But the fixtures, we absolutely know. Now, should we be planning ahead with our teams sort of 10 weeks ahead? Probably not. Many of us wildcard around game week 3 to 8. Like, that's a really hot point for wildcarders. So with that in mind, let's just look at the first run of 6 games when planning our team. So when we look at the fixture tickers, who has the best fixture runs? Well, in the first 6 games, there's a few teams that have 4 home games, quite a few with 4 homes. We like that very much. So look, let's go through a few of them. We're going to start off, of course, with some of the big boys. So Man City. We like their fixtures. They play Burnley and Sheffield United and Fulham and Forest all in the first 4. I have no doubt we'll all have Haaland +1. That might be a defender, it might be a midfielder. And once the prices are out, we'll know way more. But that's pretty obvious. Let's not spend our time talking about Man City and the what-ifs. Chelsea are a really interesting one. Now, we're going to talk more about Pochettino and his tactics later in the show, but let's just look at the fixtures, because what we're going to see with Chelsea is tons of price decreases. We'll talk more about some of their players later, but because of that, they're going to be mid-priced assets for potentially a top-tier team with a top-tier manager. So when we look at the fixtures and see they've got 4 home games in the first 6, we like that very much. I think I'll be punting on a Chelsea player or 2. Now, you might say that's silly based on last season. If I see something pre-season, I'll go there. So they play Luton and Forest at home in the first 6. They also go to Bournemouth. So 3 really nice fixtures there for Chelsea. Brighton finished the season so well, had such a good season under De Zerbi, didn't they? They've got good fixtures too. 4 homes, again, which includes Luton. It's a nice home fixture. I think Luton will be good at home. I think Luton on the road will be really ropey. A bit like Forest were last season. So Brighton have Luton at home. They play Bournemouth at home. And they play West Ham at home. So 3 good homes there for Brighton. And then Arsenal we have to consider, because again, 4 homes, which include Forest and Fulham. And Arsenal at home at the Emirates were scoring loads of goals last season, and I expect that to continue. So look, they're the teams I've got my eye on. I think I'll definitely have good representation from all of those teams just mentioned, like the 4 teams: City, Chelsea, Brighton, Arsenal. A lot of our template teams, a lot of the template teams will be full of their players. Man United and Liverpool, we're always attracted to. They're kind of middle of the road when we look at the fixture ticker. Some good, some not so good fixtures, but good teams. I expect to have good seasons. Spurs also worth keeping an eye on. But let's now look at some predicted prices, because this is loads of fun and it's really interesting because we're going to see some big increases this year. And with that, it makes for a better game, because if we see a lot of big increases to some of the well-known and template players and highly owned players, it means we can't have them all. And if we can't have them all, that's a good thing, because otherwise the game is too easy. If the game is too easy, we all have the same team. We all have Salah, we all have Haaland, we all have Rashford because he was 6.5 million. If FPL get this right and aren't too generous, then we will have to have players from not so sexy teams. We'll have to have cheaper players in our starting 11. And that's a good thing, because it means we've got a decision to make. We might only be able to have Salah or Haaland. We might not be able to have Kane and Salah, for example. We might not be able to have Trent and Trippier. You know? So let's have a look at some of the predictions. First, let's go through some of the players we think will go up in price. Then we'll look at some of the players we think will go down in price. And then let's also look at potentially some positional changes. We see it every year. There's 1 or 2 players that move from midfielder to forward or vice versa. So, predicted prices. Let's look at some of the popular ones from last season. Trippier was 5 million. He started the game at 5 million last season. I'm expecting him to go to 6 to 6.5. I'm going to go 6.5. He was so good last time out, and Newcastle will keep clean sheets aplenty. Trippier is going to have another good season. Of course he is. Set piece threat too. So a big price rise there. And because of that, I'm not sure he'll be that highly owned. I think a lot of us, including myself at 6.5, might be put off by Trippier, especially with Newcastle's first 6 fixtures. They're right at the bottom of the ticker. Matoma, another one. 5.0 last season. Solly March was really cheap too. I expect Matoma to go up to 6.5 as a minimum. So Matoma 6.5, I still think he could be in my Game Week 1 team with Brighton's fixtures. Solly March price versus Matoma price will be interesting. I expect them to probably be the same, both 6.5. Let's look at some midfielders that were potentially underpriced last year. First up, Rashford. Well, no doubt about it. Proper underpriced, 6.5. It'll be 9.0 as a minimum, potentially 9.5. I'm going to say 9.0 for Rashford, which will be really similar price point to Bruno. We'll talk about him later, but also to Saka. So Saka was at 8.0, got the penalty appeal. I think Saka goes up $1 million to Rashford's price. They'll either both be 9.0 or both be 9.5, won't they? They produced almost identical returns last season. Like there was a couple of points between their final totals. So I'm going to say Saka at 9.0, Rashford at 9.0. We're not going to be able to get both of them in our teams. Unlikely. Maybe it'll be one or the other. Kane was 11.5 last year, which was cheaper than Son. That will flip. Kane's going to go up. I'm going to say he'll be 12.5. He had such a good season last year. So $1 million increase there. And then, of course, Haaland. 11.5. Many have predicted he'll go up to 14. I'm not so sure straight away. I'm going to say 13.5. He should be 14 in my opinion. I think FPL will go 13.5. And the reason behind a lower price point like that for Haaland, I think they might be reluctant to go too expensive because it's good for the brand of Premier League, right? If in our FPL teams, we're able to pick the players we want. So I don't think they make it too difficult for us. I'd like them to make it perhaps even more difficult. So with that in mind, I expect Haaland to be 13.5. Let us know in the comments if you agree or disagree with those ones. Decreases, we're going to see decreases for those that were rubbish last year, right? Look at your Chelsea players. Look at your Spurs players. Potentially some of your United players could go down. So Reece James was 6.0. If he drops to 5.5 and he's fit, what an FPL asset he could be. I'm going to say he's going to have a little drop. Sterling, he was 10 million. He'll be 8.5-ish. Son, wow, he was 12 million, more than Kane last year. So I think Son probably drops to, well, I think I've put 9.5. I had to play with this earlier. I put 10, then I put 9.5. I think he'd be 9.5. It'd be sub 10, which for Son, if he's firing, could be useful. We'll talk about his new manager's tactics in a minute. Salah, I think, drops a little bit despite a great season. He was 13 million. I think he might be 12.5 this time round. And Bruno was 10. I think he could drop to 9.5, or maybe even he's the same price as Rashford. And again, they'll both be 9.5 or both be 9, I think. So some good drops as well as good rises. What about positional changes? Because we've seen in the past, likes of, say, Wilfried Zaha, he's been midfielder, then he's been forward, then he's been midfielder. We'll see a little bit of that, but we never see much of it. The basis around attacking players with FPL, the way they categorise it usually is, it's not the highest man up on the pitch needs to be a forward. So, for example, if that was the case, Mohamed Salah would and should have been a forward for the last 5 years at Liverpool. He's always their most advanced player. It doesn't work like that. It works with the basis for attacking players. If you play wide, like Salah, you're a midfielder. And if you play central, up front, you're a forward. So Salah will stay as a midfielder. Now, Rashford could move to forward because he's played half his games last season as a number 9 and half them wide left. I think they'll keep him as a midfielder, especially if United buy a forward in the transfer market. And again, that could play part of their thinking. And will that transfer happen before the game is out? Probably not. Therefore, Rashford could move. He could move to a forward. Personally, I think he'll probably stay as a midfielder like Salah. But the likes of Hakpo, for example, at Liverpool, he was listed as a midfielder, came into the game mid-season. He has to be a forward for me because, yes, he's not the most advanced player at Liverpool, but he is often playing as the number 9, the false 9, the Bobby Firmino. And with that, the way they categorise central players, Hakpo will be a forward, in my opinion. So that'll be an interesting one to monitor. We get fewer points for him. We'd need his price to be quite low. And Enciso last year at Brighton was listed as a forward. I think he'll be a midfielder because, again, he's played at the number 10 a lot, but he's also played wide. And with that in mind, he hasn't led the line. I think we could see him dropping back into midfield. The likes of Trent and John Stones, inverted fullbacks, as we saw with Cancelo, Zinchenko, fullbacks that will step in and play midfield with the ball. They won't get recategorised for me as midfielders. Expect Trent and Stones and Zinchenko still to continue as defenders. Guys, let's move on now to something that's been heavily rumoured in FPL, and it is every year when we look at how the game could and might change. Firstly, let's look at the current game. Chips that are in place, they've been there for a while, since the all-out attack chip was replaced. Last few seasons, chips have been the same, rules have been the same, prices and point scoring has all been the same. I think that continues, but I think there's been a lot of hints from those at the Premier League that there's going to be a new addition to the game. So rather than changing the rules, I think they've hinted at a new style and version of game. Now, we've seen the draft. There's very likely to be a new game this year. That's what's been rumoured. And what do we think that will be? Well, they're, again, as always, we've all been on Twitter going, it could be this, could be this, could be this. For me, the game that would make most sense would be something that gives you almost like a free hit every week, right? So you get to put out your 11, or maybe it'll be 15. I don't know if I was to put that game out, a free hit every week, if you just pick 11 players for 82 million, or if you get to pick 15 players for 100 million, and you get to have a free hit every week. That'd be a pretty cool game. And I think that'd be one I'd love to play in. And maybe it'll be capped to 2 players per team instead of 3 players per team. I don't know. I don't quite know what they would go with. But any new game like that, I think would be loads of fun. So I look forward to seeing that. And look, when the game is out, early July, we will know more. But that's just me speculating. Let us know in the comments what sort of changes you would like to see. I'm happy with the current game as it is in terms of chips and stuff like that. I'm not necessarily looking for them to make any changes, I don't think. You can always improve it, but there's also the argument that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And FPL attracts a huge audience, which is growing year on year. So why change too much? Let's now have a look at some of the new managers taking over some of the big teams in the Premier League. We're only going to talk about 2 managers. There are more that have come in. But I want to talk about 2 because they're 2 teams that we're really interested in for FPL, Spurs and Chelsea. Let's look at Chelsea first, Pochettino. We know about Poch because this is a manager we saw a lot at Spurs, but I was interested to see the sort of shape and system he had at PSG, to see how it compared to Spurs. And the long and short of it is not a huge amount changed. Like at Spurs, we knew him in kind of the 4-2-3-1, double pivot in midfield. And at PSG, it was pretty similar. He had kind of that base, that double pivot in midfield. He expected his fullbacks to get forward. So a 4-2-3-1 at Chelsea, you look at it and think, Reece James, Ben Chilwell, if fit, and if they get price drops, and they're 5.5 million, I really like the idea of backing Chelsea. The fixtures are there. Also, Nkunku, a 4-2-3-1 gives you a number 10 behind the striker. And I think Nkunku, in that role, which is where he had most of his games for Leipzig last year, he's played all over the place, an 8, a 9, wide on the right, but most of his minutes has been as a second striker. So Nkunku could be a really good pickup, and I really hope FPL list him as a midfielder around 8.5. I would love that. So a few players to watch based on the shape that we think Pochettino will go with, and again, pre-season we check that out. What about Spurs and Ange Postecoglou? Because this is a guy we don't know a huge amount about unless you've watched a lot of Celtic in the last couple of seasons, but he does play 4-3-3. The width often comes from the wide forwards, though, in the 4-3-3 from Postecoglou. And with that, I think we'll see Son one side and Kulu the other. And I think they'll be very dangerous, very high and very wide. And you often get midfield runs with a Postecoglou midfielder. So a number 8 getting into the box, a goal-scoring Spurs central midfielder is probably what they're looking for, and could be really valuable in FPL should the right player come in. I don't think we look at the current team and think there's that guy necessarily there. Kane's, of course, going to be really dangerous. But that's something to expect from Postecoglou, something to expect from Pochettino. And the Talking Tactics sections of these podcasts will continue through the season. When we do our game week preview every week, I always will pick out one team. I'll look at their formation, I'll look at the way they're playing, and I'll pick out some key FPL indicators. So hopefully you'll be following my journey this season. I'm already excited for FPL, and I'm sure you will be very soon. Take care, go well, see you later.